Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I'm your co-host JP John Poz from the Two Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me is the financial wrestling genius himself, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey John, thankfully I'm doing well, but hate to share some sad news, but a passing of a friend and one of our earliest guests on the Business of the Business. For those that love slam wrestling and book reviews, you already know her, know of her, but Jamie Hemmings passed away unexpectedly this week, and she was about our age and. Don't want to talk too much about her family, but she had a family and all of that. So very sad news.
Yeah, for sure. Crazy to see that here. That good friends, Facebook friend, and you see them, and you and obviously friend of the show was a former guest of the show. So just well, it really hits you. It's like, oh my god, crazy because obviously our age, so she's really young.
Yeah, and it actually hit me when I looked up like when she was on the show. I mean, it's not that important in terms of this fact, but like I remember thinking like for a long time, like we need more women on the show. We haven't had women on the show, and I totally forgot that Jamie was on the show. So I was like, okay, it didn't take us like it felt like it took us like years. It didn't take us that long, but certainly impactful. And one of the things that I wanted to note was that she was like so diligent about her work that besides like writing a book review, she called me and we had like a long discussion about TrumpMania at the time. And we were fortunate actually to catch her when she was transitioning out of slam wrestling to do something else. So it was a chance to reflect back on her work at that time.
Right. R.I.P. Jamie. Very very sad to see that and hear that. Just that stinks, but we're gonna change gears here if we can, and we're gonna talk about Linda McMahon, I guess, right? I mean,
Yes. For some people, this is now moving into positive news. For other people, it's distress. Like if you're in a job, like you're always trying to like find like how can I talk about wrestling? If you're a big fan, even if it has nothing to do
yeah,
with wrestling. Well, I
yeah,
found the way. I've been hinting at it a little while. I'm not sure if I've mentioned my like actual place where I worked before. So I work at the City College of New York, the historic City College of New York, home of I think the NIT champions in like the 1940s and all of that, the oldest of the CUNY campuses. Um, so I'm actually moderating a panel called Understanding Linda McMahon, Secretary of Education in a Age of TrumpMania. We'll have three speakers, including everyone's favorite, Brian Solomon, the, of course, distinguished author and journalist, and also including Mark Erlewine, who many of you know from X, who's actually a public school teacher, but a passionate wrestling fan as well. It's the same day as WWE Roadblock, so I've been trying to tie it in together. Plenty of time. Come to the talk at 3:30, have some dinner, make your way downtown, and plenty of time for Roadblock. Mine is free. Check it out on Eventbrite. You can look for Understanding Linda McMahon, Secretary of Education in Age of TrumpMania. Seating is limited. If you have trouble finding it, just find me on LinkedIn or X, and we have the links.
nice. That's pretty cool. So basically, it's going to be not only about her education stuff. You're going to be talking some wrestling, I guess, too. I mean, that's probably pertinent information.
Yeah, so thankfully, although I didn't completely think about that when I invited the guests, that like I was trying to find a mix of like people that are in education that know about wrestling, people that have been wrestling that have been involved in education. Everyone to different degrees that's on the panel has been involved in both. Of course, Brian, more formally with WWE, but like everyone can talk about both areas. So like the idea is sort of like to dispel like misunderstandings. I know like in the bubble we know a lot of these things, but for people that hear about like a WWE executive going to wrestling, they're like, oh, she's a performer. But if you've ever seen her work with Stone Cold Steve Austin, you know that she's definitely not a performer. She's more
Yeah.
of an executive. So it's sort of like reframe that thinking. And as we're recording, it's the day after her confirmation hearings, which were very interesting. I still remember the ones 8 years ago as well. So kind of like try and read the tea leaves in regards to education, lies up in the air, but also understand who she is, at least as a public facing figure, to try and figure out where things are going. Because depending on people's perspectives. A lot of people are curious, but there's also consternation, and people are nervous as well as the president talks about. Getting rid of the Department of Education, all of that.
Right.
So we're trying to sort it out together. So opportunity for me to have some fun.
Nice, very cool. And like you said, if you're in town for Roadblock, the NXT show, you can go to your show as well. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's turning into like a WrestleMania weekend. You have Raw, you have Roadblock, you have my talk, and then the next day, if you want to hang out, of course, you have book signing for the new WrestleMania book. John, I don't know why I'm blanking on our friend here. That's the dynamic author that's releasing a book on WrestleMania soon.
Keith Elliott Greenberg.
Yes, thank you, John. If you've been listening to the show for a while, names are a struggle for me sometimes. So Wednesday is his actually book signing at a comic book store, and then you can hang out with him at a bar after. So, wow, like this is the week to visit New York City, or if you're a tri-state resident and don't get into the city much, you should hang out in mid-March for a few days.
Love it. Now, we were always talking about TNA and how TNA never has a dull moment. They always have something going on with TNA. What is the latest? Because there's another shakeup within TNA wrestling.
Yeah, I think partly this is of their own making, meaning that if you go to Anthem's website, they still have not updated their website with Carlos Silva, the president. And that was announced, as we talked about extensively, right, in December. So something that was like a little bit confusing, which I didn't want to talk about as much because he's not really a public figure and I didn't know how it would affect his job. Anthony Ciccione had been listed as the president of sports. So when Carlos Silva came in as the president, I wasn't sure, are we the president of two different things? Will one oversee another or whatever? It was just like unclear. So there was some other movement which we'll talk about, but the first thing to know is that Carlos Silva has been there since December. They haven't updated the website for whatever reason, and he hasn't been attached to a number of things as well. Like it's been other people that have been in the press releases, but Anthony Ciccione, who's like an Anthem regular, really like baked into the fabric there. He's been there 17 years. He apparently is not leaving his job. He's just going to do something else. But the shakeups are like a little bit low. The actual shakeups are a little bit lower on the totem pole. So George Veras, who's been in sports production for 50 years, right, going back to CBS Sports, the wide world of sports, right? So still like maybe those world's strongest man type of competitions where the wrestlers were on in the 70s. Maybe he helped produce that. So you're bringing in someone with like deep experience in the field. Not on the other side completely, but somebody who's younger but experienced in this field as well. Mark Brown, who's produced with New Japan, apparently with Ring of Honor, as well as sports, as well as sort of freshening things up. Like, I don't know if it's like a complete replacement of the roles or whatever, but Josh Matthews, who had been there forever and had been in WWE before that forever, starting with Tough Enough. That's like my reference of him. He had the over-the-shoulder bag. I know he's grown into executive and professional in his own right, but unfortunately, he is leaving his job, and I think Christy Hemme also, who's on and off been part of the company. So I would say like the confusion can really be blamed, if there's blame, like on poor communication from Anthem. So not as much executive shakeout as we've been used to over the last couple of years, but definitely changes afoot. So that's the executive element. In terms of TNA in general, like, and whenever I comment on this, like, anyone that comments on TNA, unless it's fully positive on X, you're going to get slammed. Like, everyone's always like, WWE could do this for TNA. They could do that for TNA. They could send John Cena to TNA. They could get them a TV deal. But, like, until we see it, I don't think that's the WWE's priority. I think TNA is certainly benefiting from this relationship, especially one that's being formalized. But like, people should relax a little bit more, about that. Now, just looking at their schedule, and then we'll look at like some of the shows in terms of ticket sales or tickets moved. So February 20th and 21st in Winter Park, Florida, of course, long talked about. March 14th and 15th in El Paso, Texas. March 28th and 29th in St. Joseph, Missouri. April 27th in Los Angeles. And of course, July 20th in Elmont, New York for Slammiversary. So we'll talk about Slammiversary first in Belmont Park. So tickets are moving along. It's still far way away, but they're not moving that quickly at this point. 29 tickets in 7 days. So that's not so much for such a big venue after getting off to a big start. I'm not sure if like it was hard to track like the dates and so on. Like if the Hardys were supposed to be at the venue and they already showed up and that's over, and now they're sending Joe Henry and Masha Slamovich, or there was a replacement there, but there was press releases related to Henry and Slamovich making appearances. So Full Sail, like we talked about, there's a few tickets for very select reserved seating still available. They were kind of expensive relative to what it is, so that's probably why those are still hanging around. I'd imagine it'll be full by the time the show happens. In El Paso, in terms of the reserved rows, which are a number, most of those are gone. It's hard to tell, of course, with how GA is moving, just that tickets are available. That's looking pretty good. In St. Joseph, most of the tickets are still available. I think in LA, I mean, it's a very big venue, but relatively speaking, we may see a good house. When you go to the site, it says like few tickets remaining, but I think that's just logistically, as we've talked about, so it's hard to tell. But I think this might be like one of those positive shows that really like pops a number for TNA, but it's just hard to tell at the moment.
Man, TNA always has something going on. It feels like there's always movement. You know what I mean? Like they're never quite certain who's going to be the guy in charge.
Yeah, I think like in following the company for a number of years, especially, of course, I wasn't following them before that, but especially since they acquired TNA, it seems obviously you have the Asper family. The ownership, like who owns what exactly, is a little bit up in the air. We've tried to like sleuth that, and I've read articles about that, but obviously the Asper family's in charge. And then you have like their core people, like Ed Normholm and Anthony Siccioni and so on, Ariel Schnerer, that have been there forever. And then there's these other people that have like good CVs, like they have names attached to them and whatever, but they seem to like float in and out and and don't last.
Very, very true. What is going on? What is the latest with the GCW? I feel like they have a lot of news and maybe a lot of new venues.
Yeah, so this is just sort of like Brett. So much has been about the Hammerstein, right? Like, and it's such like a high risk, high reward, PR type challenges as well. He said, like, basically, to paraphrase, like Hammerstein is great, but what other venues in New York City? And I took that to mean like in Manhattan, because they already have a venue in Brooklyn. They have one in Queens. They could always look for more there, but it got my mind going, and I'm somebody that enjoys like doing venue research and so on. So I sent this to Brett. Brett, check your DMs. I haven't heard back yet, but I just want to talk about the ones that I found being like reasonable. Like, if never in the history of the venue have they ever hosted anything like pro wrestling? What do I mean by like if they could set up a boxing ring before, even if they never had wrestling, like it would make sense to me. But also at the same time, I'm not going to be like, okay, Radio City Music Hall once had a Roy Jones Jr. fight. It was like a one-off special thing, HBO premium event. I'm not going to say now like that GCW should go to Radio City. So we're going to have like reasonable expectations as well. But for Manhattan, so you have the Bowery Ballroom, which has 575 potentially. They've had boxing. Webster Hall, which I think might have had a shotgun Saturday night before it was redesigned. But they've had boxing there before. So the Grand Ballroom has a 1,500 capacity. The Marlin Ballroom has 600 and Studio has 400. We all know Terminal 5. Luis Perez, of our PW Ponderings, we're the official business podcast of PW Ponderings. He hates Terminal 5. I kind of don't like it either. I don't hate it. It's kind of a schlep from the subway. But, that was the venue that Ring of Honor went to when they weren't running the Hammerstein Ballroom. So for a semi-high profile show, that could just make sense. For a show that would require as much promotion as the Hammerstein, the Palladium Times Square, that's been named and renamed a million times, probably almost as much as the Theater at the Garden. But that hosted the New Japan shows, and I think Little Person Wrestling also at some point. So that would be a solid venue. Now, a couple years ago, we talked about my trek downtown to Sukaban at the Capitol NYC, which was a 700-seat venue. Stage 48. So this was a cool thing for me. That was when Chikara ran there. So they ran 2 shows there. It's like a multi-tiered, I don't know if you call it a bar, something, some sort of nightclub bar, restaurant. I don't know if I'm dating myself, but it could have a potential capacity of 1,000, not for wrestling, not in that way, but it's kind of a cool venue. Obviously, Brett knows about that, the Hammerstein has an upstairs, the Manhattan Center upstairs, the Grand Ballroom, we all know from Monday Night Raw. The New Yorker Hotel, I know that they were going through some changes. It's actually connected to the Manhattan Center. When you actually go to the New Yorker Hotel's website, they actually advertise the Grand Ballroom to you, so there's a formal relationship, if not ownership there. But the New Yorker Hotel proper has actually hosted Ring of Honor shows. I went to at least one, maybe 2 or more. One thing melted into the other, but that was a cool venue. Obviously, the Theater at the Garden is a big jump, right? That's over 5,000 potentially. We'll see NXT, which we just talked about there. So those are, the potential venues for New York City, just to think about. Also, in a totally other geography, Brett had tweeted out who has the venue hookup in Oklahoma City. So, we know that he wants to go to all 50 states, so that would make a lot of sense. Not going to go into the attendance and all of that, or how many rows are moved for each GCW show at the moment. We'll take a look at that at a different time. I just want to go through their shows upcoming. John, I was thinking of you, by the way. What's the venue in Asbury Park that they run? I just saw that they announced 3 shows for their Jersey Championship Wrestling brand, which has been kind of quiet, but they already have 3 dates on the books. I think it's every other month upcoming.
Nice. I like that. Very cool.
So February 15th and 16th, the Jersey J Cup in Jersey City. February 28th, National City, California. March 1st and 2nd, LA and Mesa, Arizona. So Zack Sabre Jr. is going to be there, and I'm a little bit behind sometimes on the actual wrestling news of who has what belts, and I was like, they have Zack Sabre Jr. and they're not promoting him as the New Japan champion, and then I was Googling and I was like, oh, he just lost the belt a few days ago. So, but he's somebody that I go out of my way to buy tickets for a couple times. Back to Atlantic City on March 15th and 16th, in Chicago on March 29th, Sauget, Illinois on March 30th. Then you hit the Vegas show. So, hoping WrestleTix wants to pick up the count. So it's an interesting map, because this venue that they're at, the Pro Concert Theater, I think it's 2,500 seats. There's a big section in the middle that I don't think that they've put on sale. So I think it's worth just looking at for today, the highest profile show, which typically sells the most tickets, Joey Janela's Spring Break. So in terms of the lower tier around the ring, and then some of the outer edge, sort of in the first balcony, or at least risers. They've sold some tickets there, but everything else, looks quiet at the moment. I'm not sure of the patterns for WrestleMania weekend as it picks up and people figure out their first plans for that. Oh, one thing that, of course, I forgot to note in TNA, but it relates to this, is now TNA just announced a show that they're going to be doing in Vegas. And the venue is about 3,000 people large, depending on how you set it up. So I think that's the Thursday night before WrestleMania. So more competition there in the market.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So with them having more, I don't know, like more like JCW, like more different leagues, does that mean the GCW brand won't be a part of like the House of Independence and stuff? Will they, or is it just JCW?
With that run, I don't think it's like co-branded. I think it's the JCW independently, but I don't think it would like preclude GCW from running there, which is interesting because like House of Independence, it seems like a little bit, it's smaller, right, John? But it's like a little bit more upscale. So it's interesting that they're attempting to run it with like their secondary brand.
Yep. Weird. I don't know. I just found that interesting. As far as Zack Sabre Jr. is concerned, well, obviously that's New Japan Pro Wrestling. He lost to Hiroki Goto, the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. But what's the latest on New Japan Pro Wrestling?
So the first element is their presence in the UK on the Extreme Channel. From what I gathered, it's free, but it's fairly low profile. But they're building up or growing. So First Extreme Channel UK is now officially available on Channel Box via Freeview Channel 271, a bundle of free to-air TV channels delivered to Freeview via the internet, supported by an app, and so on. So I'm not sure if, I guess this is a bundle of like streaming and over the air and so on, but with New Japan, they're expanding their relationship there. After successfully partnering with Extreme Channel in the UK for popular airings of Destruction and Kobe, King of Pro Wrestling and Power Struggle since 2023, New Japan has inked an extended broadcasting agreement with the channel that will see the company become a tentpole broadcast offering for the channel in 2025. The agreement will see major events airing in full on Extreme, beginning with the British television premiere of Wrestle Kingdom 19, airing Saturday, February 15th at 6 p.m. Wrestle Kingdom 19 will be followed by Wrestle Dynasty in late February with repeat airings on a bi-monthly basis. Let's skip ahead. Extreme Channel's chief commercial officer Einstein said, following the success of the multiple events we have broadcast in partnership with New Japan since 2023, we're thrilled to be expanding our broadcast agreement for one of the world's most recognized and respected wrestling brands. As a TV home, we're excited to celebrate legendary Japanese wrestling talent. Tanahashi, well, I don't know, how Tanahashi usually expresses himself, but it just sounded like they took this quote, although obviously couldn't have very much said it. I couldn't be more excited for fans in the UK to sample the red-hot action of New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I hope you show your support for New JPW and JPW, of course, and Extreme. UK fans, Ashimatsu. Apologies if I botched that. We know the Ontario, California show is actually on sale today, so a little bit early to get those numbers. But Windy City Riot, looking really good. 2 months out, of course, Tanahashi's retirement show, very big venue, but 2,643 tickets moved, 183 since the last update. So it'll be hard consistently to be at that clip. Usually towards the end, you get more going, but it could be one of the biggest, most attended shows outside of WWE or AEW in the U.S. this year.
Interesting. I'm kind of interested why Zack Sabre lost the title already. You know what I mean? Just that kind of intrigued me a bit of why he lost the IWGP World Championship. He just won at the Tokyo Dome, just won the day after at the New Year Dash against Ricochet. So that was surprising to me.
Yeah, to me, I'm always looking, very curious. It's hard to me. I know that it's just very different in terms of the way that decisions are made and all of that. Maybe actually next week is the Pride premiere episode of Dark Side, and I had asked Zach Arnold if he'd be available, and he was willing. We didn't commit him to next week yet, but I think we should make a note, like, to get some insight into New Japan's dealings as well. There's only so many people here that know enough about it. But yeah, to me, like, totally talking out of turn as, like, a U.S. fan that doesn't even watch so much, like, it didn't make sense to me, and like, except for, I mean, age isn't so much a thing anymore, but to lose to somebody who's 46 when you're trying to, like, rebuild things, maybe this person, like, has that legendary feel already, or like has a lot of momentum, and that works best for the market. But like, to me, looking at it, I was like, okay, you don't want to, like, gear everything because you're coming to the US a couple of times, or you're on TV in the UK on a lower level station, but like, if you're trying to make inroads, like, it just didn't make as much sense to me. Could totally be wrong, because it's a different market.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Godo, obviously very legendary wrestler over there. He was one of the guys that never had won the IWGP World Championship before. So it's one of those things where he finally overcame and did it. It just was odd timing to me because of the Zack Sabre Jr. push.
Yeah, maybe it's like, if I'm understanding correctly, John, like Cinderella Man type of thing, where like you
Yep.
have this like underdog, and like they finally win the big one. I mean, ECW screwed that up by having Johnny Dreamer win for like 2 minutes
Yeah, yeah.
before nothing gets just incredible for winning. So like, so you have to like let those moments like sit, or like. Madison Square Garden, when I don't know if it was the first time Liger was there, right? Or was it Liger or Muda? I might be mixing things up, but that disastrous ROH New Japan show, and we thought, I think it was
Yes.
Liger that won the Battle Royal at the beginning, and then somebody else tossed them out. It was just like, oh, like, you only have like so many of these moments, you have to capitalize on them.
That was bad. Yeah, that bad booking. No doubt about that. But as far as MLW is concerned, what is the latest?
So MLW, in terms of going to venues, they're doing their thing, and they have a pretty good flow right now in that regard. Anytime you go out the door and you have to like have production and fly people in for smaller venues, like, it's not necessarily a cash positive thing historically in wrestling. I have no idea with MLW how the finances work out, but on February 8th in Center Stage, that was sold out, as it would pretty much be expected to, but it's not always automatic. GCW has struggled there relatively the last few times they've been there. April 5th in LA, it's a little bit hard to tell with the way the ticket map is, if all the tickets have been on sale or not, but looks like it's doing very well. Chicago in May looks like it's doing very well. New York in June, there's plenty of tickets remaining in the Melrose, but it's been a solid venue for them. I'm sure they'll pretty much fill it up as well. So, using these generally smaller venues to tape their programming, it's just sort of like, what's this all for? Like, without knowing behind the scenes, when they apparently got these monies from WWE, um, I just didn't see a path forward for them to like stand out in wrestling. And they're sort of like more than spinning their wheels, because they're out of the 2300 arena now, and they're going somewhere else every month, and they're putting it on YouTube and people are watching, but I'm not sure, like, how do they make money? Like, how do you go to the next step? And sometimes it feels like a promotion is stuck, and TNA like seemed to be stuck for a while, and now they're like zooming. So maybe there's a path forward. I haven't seen it with MLW in a while. It seems like a challenge.
So as far as MLW is concerned, obviously they've got some interesting venues, right? They're coming back to New York, right?
Yeah, so they're back in New York. They have their. I mean, they hadn't been in LA in some time.
Yeah.
But they had that. Chicago, they basically have their spot there, which is a really good venue for them. It looks great on TV, sort of like a little bit rustic but big too. Dallas looks great for them on TV. New York is automatic for them. So like, Atlanta is solid for them. So like I think of that, they have that figured out. Now it's sort of like, how do you move forward, to the next level, and I'm not sure what you do. You're sort of like you have to play a little bit of Moneyball. Who's out there on the market, and like people aren't going to be have spotless records, or they'll have challenges, and so on, and you have to like be willing to take risks on people, or like spotlight people who haven't been spotlighted before. It's like a semi-national, like not exactly an independent wrestling company by a traditional sense. You're trying to go for like a national or international profile, and you have some of that on beIN Sports and the way that you're being distributed, but it's like it's not necessarily going to stand out. There's just like so much wrestling content.
What about Vice? What is the latest for Vice?
So in terms of wrestling, there might be nothing as the latest, but I just keep looking at like what Vice is doing. Obviously, we know like basically their whole network with their financial difficulties kind of became less about politics. Although like not looking for it. I've seen some stuff on YouTube that concerns me. Some foreign governments releasing a documentary at the same time Vice did, and they both came up as recommendations with different names. And I was like, who's really like who's really paying for things, and like what's Vice getting at? Like not to get too political, but that concerns me. But in terms of the things that we like, the dark side of the ring, certainly like the wrestling thing has worked out for them. And the talking about MLW, obviously we had that saga, and I think that they still air WoW in late night hours, and then they had the MMA dark side, which I haven't heard much. I haven't looked much into the ratings, but I'm not sure how that's doing, because they had Dark Side of Football, Dark Side of the 90s, so certain things will hit and not. But they are pivoting into sports, and less expensive or less exposed properties. One of my like morbid curiosities is to follow like the business side of arena football, because it's just because it's been such a disaster. Recently, like the arena football restarted, and then like they collapsed midway, and then they restarted, and then they formed again under a different name or whatever. So they signed. Whatever the new form group is, signed a deal with Vice, so they're going to have like at least when it's in season, like a weekly game. And now they've signed Bare Knuckle, and they'll be showing a lot of the premier events as well. So they're kind of going for obviously football isn't a combat sport, but obviously a more physical sport. Then you have the Bare Knuckle. So to me, it's kind of like, okay, like, are you going to give like primetime wrestling another chance? But sort of knowing that they're not going to be in the position to bid, or even if the rights were available, for like a premier product from WWE and AEW. And I can't at this time, unless like there's more funding to it or whatever, I can't see them being like, okay, Freddie Prinze, like, we'll produce your show, or Billy Corgan, the NWA, or Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, whatever, something like that. No shade on any of them. So you're kind of looking at three things, and one of them is like, or the fourth is sort of like something that I'm kind of like just speculating on. So what do you do? Like, what properties can you have? So I don't think Lucha Libre would really fit, but I think what would fit, like New Japan, obviously they've been off Access TV. Ring of Honor, we had Jericho talking about like looking for a streaming deal, but maybe there's a mix of a deal with streaming and television distribution that would probably make it more viable, where Vice wouldn't need all of the rates. TNA, obviously we know that they're looking for more distribution, in addition to Access TV, which the parent company owns. And then sort of like, as I think about WWE distribution, they're finding all the different ways to do it with Evolve and so on. Like, if they did want to partner with TNA, something like NXTNA would be sort of like an interesting amalgamation where I don't think they'd be like violating like an NXT deal with the CW, and they could have like a unique thing there. So like in terms of like if Vice was interested in pro wrestling, what would be like reasonably viable? And those
Yep.
are the properties that I can imagine.
What is going on with your favorite topic of all time, Here and There? And is that a real live picture of Mercedes Monet that I see?
Yes, so it's not mine. It's from the House of Glory X page in their social media, but apparently that they flashed it up there in Times Square. I guess it's, recurring, however that advertising works. I don't think it's there like permanently, like in the main area of Times Square, but probably cycling through for a certain amount of hours or days. That Mercedes Monet, her appearance with House of Glory Wrestling is being put up there right in Times Square with a hashtag and her picture and the date and so on. So try and move the tickets for this show at Club Amazura in Queens, where front row tickets are $175. What else is going on, our friends at Mass Republic, the Mass Mania? They have their two ambitious shows coming up. So just looking at one at the moment on WrestleTix, via WrestleTix, Gas South Arena in Duluth, Georgia on May 3rd. So big venue set up is 3,833, and they moved 476 tickets so far. So an experiment. It's early, but we'll see. Just 36 tickets were moved in the last 7 days. Now, John, do you say Qatar or Qatar? Because I hear it both ways. Which one should we go for on this show?
I always say Qatar.
Yeah, me too. I feel like more recently, like newscasters were like Qatar, but to me, I'm always like back to Qatar. So, although we know the pro wrestling affinity by certain sheiks in the Middle East and power players there, but Qatar doesn't get as much attention. But they've had their Super Slam series for a number of years, or different events. So they're booking a lot of people there in the Ladies Hall. Super Slam 3 will feature wrestling legends including Mustafa Ali, Dolph Ziggler, Matt Cardona, Hio Del Vikingo, Alberto Del Rio, Bobby Lashley, Mick Foley, and Jushin Liger will make appearances and so on. It's a 2-day event, 30 international wrestling superstars. It's being promoted with Visit Qatar, partnering with them, the Qatar calendar. It's the venue can hold 4,000 people, of course, for each day. There's a VIP experience and so on. So interesting to see like these international tours. Probably a good payday for those that go over. An interesting highlight of wrestling in the region. And finally, just to put a cap on it, the Beast from WoW Wrestling, who I was only peripherally familiar with before. Her name is Twana. She unfortunately lost. She was the finalist on Beast Games. There was a $10 million prize in the end. She had 3 chances to walk away with $1 million, but she did not choose to do so. So she wanted to go for that originally $5 million, later $10 million. So she did walk away with $180,000. So however many weeks probably the show required. I don't imagine it'd be months, but obviously a good payday, but not a life-changing payday for her. But my son has become a fan, so I think I mentioned last week I showed him a match of hers. I'm curious to see if she returns to the world of wrestling, or maybe this opens up other opportunities for her. She played the game with integrity, at least what was shown in a reality show environment. But if you like those sort of things, I'm not a Mr. Beast fan, but if you like those type of games, she was a very interesting player.
Intriguing there that she didn't go for the money when she probably should have. Damn it. Come on.
Yeah, like what? Like if your maximum, well, like the first two chances, the maximum she could have won was 5 million. And if you have 1 million in hand, like part of it was like a little emotional because like it helped her team by not taking whatever. But at the end of the day, it was like only one main winner, and you have that $1 million. You have to go for it.
Gotcha. All right, Lavi, let's wrap this bad boy up and head towards the plugs. You follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip. What about you, Lavi?
Yeah, follow me on X at Lavie Marg, LAVIE MARG. Check out my long form articles on LionCubJobSearch.com. Go check out the upcoming event at City College of New York via Eventbrite. We are the official business podcast of PW Ponderings, and we are distributed by the Creative Control Network.
All right. Thank you, Lavi. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.